Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of holophase. Part 58. Disagreement as pattern divergence, not immediate crisis. We began with pattern itself. What can be compared, what stays the same through change. The fourfold identity gave us the bones. A pattern is itself across transformations, and we can prove it publicly. We learned to measure without smuggling time, to remember without storing the past, to model without confusing map and territory. Part 51 built the firewall between layers. Part 51.5 protected the past from future rewriting. Part 52 reframed error as diagnostic signal. Part 53 taught us to correct while preserving lineage. Part 53.5 gave us a taxonomy of failure. Part 54 taught us that uncertainty is the shape of finite access. Part 54.3 distinguished kinds of not knowing. Part 54.5 showed us that instruments drift and must be calibrated. Part 55 taught us that claims must be replayable. Part 56 taught us that paths must be auditable. Part 57 taught us that claims must be falsifiable. Now we face the human reality of science. People disagree. The problem we now face when good scientists disagree. Imagine two scientists looking at the same data. One says, "This shows that the treatment works." The other says, "This shows no effect at all." They are both honest, both are skilled, both have examined the evidence carefully, yet they reach opposite conclusions. What is happening? Is one of them incompetent? Is one dishonest? Is science failing? Not necessarily. This is the problem of disagreement. In everyday life, we often treat disagreement as a sign that something is wrong. If two people disagree, we think one must be mistaken. If two experts disagree, we think the field is in crisis. If two studies conflict, we think science can't be trusted. But in pattern science, disagreement is often something else entirely. Disagreement is often divergence in windows, scales, mappings, boundaries, or processing path, not necessarily contradiction in reality itself. Different access can yield different appearances without contradiction. Think of the old story about blind men and an elephant. One feels the trunk and says it's a snake. Another feels the leg and says it's a tree. Another feels the side and says it's a wall. They disagree, but not because any is wrong. They disagree because they are accessing different parts of the same reality through different windows. Scientific disagreement is often like that. Different methods, different instruments, different interpretations, different assumptions, all can lead to different conclusions without any single view being false. The challenge is not to eliminate disagreement. The challenge is to understand it. What disagreement really is. Disagreement is often treated as a social problem, a conflict between people, egos, or schools of thought. But in pattern science, disagreement is first a diagnostic signal. It tells us that something in the pathway from reality to claim is diverging. The divergence could be in how we access the pattern, how we process it, how we interpret it, or how we bound it. The question is not who is right, but where does the path diverge? This shift is crucial. It moves disagreement from the realm of conflict to the realm of inquiry. It turns a social problem into a scientific opportunity. When we treat disagreement as a signal, we ask, are we looking through different windows? Are we operating at different scales? Are we using different boundary assumptions? Are we applying different transformations? Are we interpreting through different maps? Are our uncertainties misaligned? Are we making different selections? These are not accusations. They are diagnostic questions. They are the beginning of understanding, not the end of conversation. An everyday analogy: the mountain from different sides. Imagine a mountain. Two people describe it. One says, the mountain has a steep, rocky face. It's dangerous and difficult to climb. Another says, the mountain has a gentle, forested slope. It's peaceful and easy to walk. They disagree completely. Are they both wrong? No. They are describing different sides of the same mountain. Their disagreement is not about the mountain itself. It is about which side they are viewing. If they could walk around and see each other's perspective, they would understand. Scientific disagreement is often like this. Different methods, different instruments, different questions, all reveal different aspects of the same reality. The disagreement is real, but it is not a contradiction. It is a difference in access. Sources of disagreement, a diagnostic toolkit. Let us map the many sources of legitimate scientific disagreement. Different windows. One study uses a microscope, another uses the naked eye. One measures at dawn, another at dusk. Different windows reveal different aspects. Scale mismatch. One study looks at individual molecules, another at whole cells. One examines year-to-year variation, another examines century-long trends. Patterns at one scale may not appear at another. Boundary assumptions. One study includes certain populations, another excludes them. One defines the region one way, another way. Boundaries shape what counts as inside. Canonicalization differences. One study normalizes data one way, another way. One uses a particular reference frame, another a different one. Canonicalization choices affect comparability. Uncertainty misalignment. One study reports central values, another includes confidence intervals. One accounts for certain error sources, another doesn't. Misaligned uncertainty can create apparent disagreement. Interpretation map differences. One study interprets a signal as meaningful, another as noise. One reads a text as literal, another as metaphorical. Interpretation maps vary. Toolchain differences. One study uses software version A, another uses version B. One preprocesses data one way, another way. Toolchains can produce different results. Selection policies. One study includes certain data points, another excludes them. One chooses a particular time window, another a different one. Selections shape outcomes. Claim type confusion. One makes an identity claim, another makes a predictive claim. One describes, another explains. Different claim types can appear to conflict when they are actually doing different work. Each of these is a potential source of disagreement, and each is diagnosable. An example across scales. Let us see disagreement at work across different scales of reality. At the quantum scale, two physicists measure the same particle. One gets position X, the other gets position Y. Disagreement. Maybe their detectors are calibrated differently. Maybe quantum uncertainty means the particle simply doesn't have a fixed position. At the biological scale, two ecologists study the same forest. One says species diversity is declining. The other says it's stable. Disagreement. Maybe they are using different sampling methods. Maybe they are looking at different timescales. At the medical scale, two clinical trials study the same drug. One finds it effective, the other finds no effect. Disagreement. Maybe the patient populations differ. Maybe the dosing regimens differ. Maybe the outcome measures differ. At the climate scale, two climate models project different future temperatures. Disagreement. Maybe they use different parameterizations. Maybe they have different resolution. Maybe they make different assumptions about feedback loops. At the human scale, Two historians interpret the same document differently. Disagreement. Maybe they bring different contextual knowledge. Maybe they have different theories about the period. Types of disagreement. Not all are the same. Not all disagreement is the same. We need to distinguish. Apparent disagreement. This resolves when we align conditions. The two mountain viewers disagree, but when they see each other's perspective, they understand. The disagreement was never about the mountain, it was about access. Genuine contradiction. Sometimes claims really cannot both be true. If one study says the treatment saves lives and another says it kills people, under the same conditions with the same methods, something is wrong. These disagreements require further testing. Scope different truths. One claim is true within its scope, another within its scope, and they don't conflict because they apply to different domains. Newton's laws and Einstein's relativity are both true within their respective scopes. Underdetermined disagreement. The evidence is genuinely insufficient to decide between competing claims. Multiple interpretations remain viable. Premature resolution would be unscientific. Honest suspension of judgment is required. Distinguishing these types is essential. Treating all disagreement as contradiction leads to false crisis. Treating all disagreement as apparent leads to false resolution. 7. Resolution through alignment, not authority. When disagreement arises, the proper response is not to appeal to authority. It is not to shout louder. It is not to gather more allies. The proper response is alignment. We must align our windows, our scales, our boundaries, our canonicalizations, our uncertainties, our interpretations, our tool chains, our selections. We must replay each other's paths. We must audit each other's choices. Only after alignment can we see whether the disagreement was apparent, genuine, scope different, or underdetermined. This is scientific work. It is hard. It takes time. It requires patience and precision. But it is the only way to turn disagreement from conflict into discovery. Imagine two surveyors who disagree about the height of a mountain. They don't settle it by shouting. They compare their instruments, their methods, their reference points. They align their measurements. Then they see where the disagreement came from. Science is the same. The role of replay and audit. Replayability and auditability are essential tools for resolving disagreement. If two scientists disagree, the first step is to replay each other's paths. Can I reproduce your result using your declared methods and data? Can you reproduce mine? If replay succeeds, the disagreement is not about basic facts. It's about interpretation, scope, or something else. If replay fails, we have a diagnostic signal. Where did the path diverge? Was it in the data, the transformations, the selections, the toolchain? Audit then inspects those divergences. Were choices hidden? Were assumptions unstated? Were boundaries different? Together, replay and audit turn disagreement from a mystery into a solvable puzzle. Some disagreements should remain unresolved. This is a hard lesson for many. Sometimes the evidence does not decide. Sometimes multiple interpretations remain viable. Sometimes underdetermination is real. In these cases, the scientific thing to do is not to resolve the disagreement. Premature resolution is as unscientific as unresolved contradiction. It forces a conclusion that the evidence does not support. It creates false certainty. It shuts down inquiry. Honest science sometimes requires living with disagreement. It requires saying, the evidence is insufficient. We need more. Until then, multiple views remain possible. This is not failure. This is intellectual honesty. This is respect for the limits of access. 10. An analogy. The two maps. Imagine two maps of the same region. One is a road map showing highways, streets, and intersections. Another is a topographic map showing elevation, rivers, and mountains. They look very different. A traveler using only the road map might say the topographic map is wrong because it doesn't show the roads. A traveler using only the topographic map might say the road map is wrong because it doesn't show the terrain. But both are correct. They just serve different purposes. They show different aspects of the same reality. Scientific disagreements are often like this. Different methods, different questions, different tools, all reveal different truths. The task is not to eliminate one map, but to understand what each shows and why. 11. Personalization is a category mistake. One of the major lessons of this chapter is this: do not immediately personalize scientific disagreement. To personalize too quickly is often a category mistake. It turns divergence in pattern access or processing into ego conflict. Of course, people can behave badly. Pride and politics do exist. But the framework insists that the first move should not be moral drama. It should be structural diagnosis. What differs in the access? What differs in the path? What differs in the claim type? What differs in declared uncertainty? What differs in scope? Only after these are inspected should stronger judgments appear. This protects the culture of inquiry from unnecessary hostility. 12. The disagreement principle. Let us state the principle clearly. Disagreement can be scientifically productive when treated as divergence in pattern access and processing rather than immediate ego conflict or reality contradiction. It reveals where access differs and where understanding is incomplete. In simpler form, disagreement is data, not defeat. Or even shorter, diagnose before you dispute. This principle transforms our relationship with disagreement. It turns conflict into inquiry. It makes divergence a source of learning rather than a threat to authority. What disagreement reports should include? When we find ourselves in disagreement, we should diagnose. What differs? Windows, scales, boundaries, canonicalizations, uncertainties, interpretations, tool chains, selections, claim types. What type of disagreement is this? Apparent, genuine, scope different, underdetermined? What alignment steps were attempted? Did we replay, audit, align conditions? What remains unresolved and why? Is the evidence insufficient? Are the differences principled? This is not bureaucracy. This is the discipline of turning disagreement from conflict into diagnosis. The disagreement gate. Because disagreement can be mishandled, it needs its own gate. Gate. Disagreement diagnostic. When disagreement is declared as part of scientific discourse, it should include disagreement source. What dimension of access or processing differs? Type classification. What kind of disagreement is this? Resolution attempts. What alignment steps were taken? Unresolved elements. What remains open and why? This gate ensures that disagreement is treated as diagnostic, not personal. 15. What we refuse. With disagreement properly framed, we have clear grounds for refusal. We refuse any disagreement that is personalized rather than diagnosed, ignores access differences, treats all disagreement as contradiction, forces premature resolution without evidence, uses authority to settle underdetermined cases, hides pipeline differences, denies underdetermination where it exists. Each refusal protects the scientific value of disagreement. 16. Firewalls against disagreement abuse. Several firewalls protect against mishandling disagreement. No personalizing scientific disagreement. The issue is not who is right, but where the path diverges. No treating mismatch as incompetence. Different X's does not mean one party is wrong. No hiding pipeline differences. Disagreement often reveals where methods diverge. This is information, not embarrassment. No pretending resolution when underdetermined. Honest suspension is better than false certainty. No authority settling scientific disagreement. Truth is not decided by votes, prestige, or power. These firewalls ensure that disagreement remains productive rather than destructive. 17. The deeper meaning, disagreement as humility. There is something profound about this view of disagreement. It requires humility. It requires admitting that our access is not the only access. Our window is not the only window. Our interpretation is not the only interpretation. When we disagree, we are not necessarily confronting error. We may be confronting a different part of reality, accessed through a different path. This humility does not weaken science, it strengthens it. It opens us to learning. It makes us curious rather than defensive. A science that can hold disagreement without panic is a mature science. A science that must resolve every disagreement immediately is a fragile science. We are building a mature science. 18. The maturity vision. Let us state what mature science looks like. An immature system personalizes. When disagreement appears, it asks, who is wrong? Who is to blame? Whose side are you on? A mature system diagnoses. When disagreement appears, it asks, where did the paths diverge? What differs in access? What can we learn? An immature system reaches for authority. It wants a winner declared by prestige, by seniority, by institutional power. A mature system reaches for alignment. It wants windows aligned, scales compared, boundaries examined, and certainties reconciled. An immature system forces closure. It cannot tolerate openness. It must have an answer now. A mature system allows honest suspension. It can say, we do not yet know. The evidence does not decide. We will wait and work. This is the difference between science as performance and science as genuine inquiry. We are building the second kind. 19. Handoff to what comes next. With disagreement understood as diagnostic, we have tools to handle the present. But science must also handle the future. Science is not done by individuals alone. It is done across generations. Knowledge must survive its creators. It must be transmitted, preserved, and extended by those who come after. How do we ensure that pattern science continues across time? How do we pass not just results, but the capacity to understand, test, and extend them? That is where we go next. Continuity across generations will give us the tools to ensure that public science outlasts any individual scientist. It will address how knowledge is preserved, transmitted, and renewed across time. Because a science that dies with its creators is not a public science. It is a private achievement, lost to the future. We are building something meant to last. We have added another layer to our growing science. We learned that disagreement is not crisis, it is diagnostic. We learned that disagreement often arises from differences in access, windows, scales, boundaries, canonicalizations, uncertainties, interpretations, tool chains, selections, claim types. We learned to distinguish apparent disagreement, genuine contradiction, scope different truths, and underdetermined disagreement. We learned that resolution comes through alignment, not authority, through replay and audit, not shouting. We learned that some disagreements should remain unresolved. Underdetermination is honest. Premature resolution is not. We learned that disagreement requires humility. The willingness to see that our access is not the only access, our truth not the only truth. We learned what mature science looks like. It diagnoses rather than personalizes, aligns rather than appeals to authority, suspends rather than forces closure. A science that can hold disagreement is a science that can learn. A science that panics at disagreement is a science that cannot. We are building a science that can learn. Now we go deeper still, into continuity across generations, because what we build must outlast us. It must be passed on. It must live beyond any single lifetime. That is the final test of public science. Always, peace be upon you.